timber all around you, you know. You couldn't go no place without this timber. And they just figured, well, the old timers used to just cut it and burn it up. Get rid of it, you know. And they just thought that never would ever see the day that it'd be cut.
I was born here on this place, 1888. Lots of big trees, would burn them down. They'd slice the place down and burn it off, then burn the logs. You couldn't give it away at that time. Well, I like timber. I like to grow timber. I could tell some of them I spent the most of my working life cutting trees. Then when I retired, I went to growing them. And I get a bigger kick out of growing. Yeah. I want my trees to be appreciated.
Yeah, the big stuff really is a big stuff has been cut out. The old timers never dreamed they'd ever see the end of them. They'd go on and on, they thought.
It's natural tree country. Well, because if you don't keep cultivating a piece of this country, you go back to forest. Natural.
At that time, I think everybody, they just thought timber was inexhaustible. There was no end to it. They didn't think that we needed to conserve any of it. And it's a tragic thing because Wisconsin, I don't think there's even a representative stand of white pine left there. And I think people now are coming to realize that too late probably that we need that.
Yes, lots of changes. You've seen the change from steam to diesel. Saw the the high climber being displaced by steel towers. Railroads are gone. The trucks have come in. Loggers wore soft hats and tin coats and tin pants in those days. Now it's the other way around. They wear tin hats and softer other clothes. The size of the timber is dropped tremendously. The atmosphere of the camp is gone. It used to be that in a camp you would hear steam. You would hear a shop, you would hear locomotive whistles, the trains switching. All of these things are gone. One of the things that you miss most of all in the woods is the voice command of the head rigger or second rigger or the hook tender.
Today we have the power saw and they make plenty of noise. But falling timber was comparatively quiet. You just hear that swish, 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 swish of the saw, and it wasn't even that loud. And then once in a while you'd hear the ring of the wedges as they wedge their tree. And today I don't hear the sound of or the cry of timber, but I can remember I would hear the timber fallers way up on the ridge, and they would holler, "Timber down the hill," and that meant for the buckers down below, maybe hundreds of feet below, to look out, because this big tree, tons and tons and tons, a lot of times would get away from them and go like a runaway express train down the hill. And it was a beautiful sound, and this sound, the call of timber, which was not just for the fun of it, but was very necessary to protect the lives of the men.
The only work there was is either work in the woods or not work. You go out and kind of in the spring, you know, when the falling the timber and they the boughs begin to dry up, and the odor from they sure got a sweet smell. And you get around them old pitchy stumps, and the pitch smells good. It really gets in your blood. And being out among the timber is a big factor too.
If you're falling by hand, I'm pretty near always a man will board. He won't work on the ground because you've got something solid under your feet and you're on a level. Where if you work on the ground, you're not on a level. I've been on trees where I was 40 feet off on the ground, not necessarily on a tree, but I've been out over a cliff that was, say, 40, 50 feet off on the ground to cut a tree.
In those days, they didn't monkey with anything. Any big tree or any of them had a conch on it. Why, they left it. They didn't want it at all.
You wouldn't even fall on it?
No, wouldn't even fall. Yeah, I know one set of pollards that they'd go along over a hard tree. A tree was hard to get at, you know, maybe on a little rock bluff or something, and they all had the springboard, you know, put springboards in it, and so they just go get a conch off an old tree, and they carried some nails. They'd nail a conch on it, see, so when the bullbuck come around, why, man, it's got a conch on it there. They pulled that right along. Nail a conch on the tree, keep cutting it.
You also talk about the tree as he.
Mm-hmm. He's one of us. He's tree. I mean, it's you, the next fellow, and the tree. There's three people, I guess you might say. Not so in the sense, but because there's certain things about he's tall, and of course he's either sound or it's probably unsound. You're going to try to save him, and of course all these things, you know, you try to work out. So you wonder what's going to happen, what is it going to do when you fall and all that. See, so but I always do it. A tree is something. Each tree is different, and since you have to try to save it more and try to save the timber that is down too, then you have to go into it a little further and find out exactly what can you do. You want to save all that's possible of that tree. Mm-hmm. We do anything possible that might help us save the particular tree. Now that's where the feeling for trees or for timber today that we have that wasn't around 25, 30, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, maybe even 10, 12 years ago.
There's never a week goes by that things don't happen to open your eyes and make you realize that there's a lot of power there that you don't have any control over whatsoever. You've got to outsmart it, outthink it.
But I told her that I'd seen thousands of them fell, and I always felt the same way about it too. I hated to see a tree fell, but I understood that it had to be done. There's certain satisfaction in seeing a thrill or excitement in seeing the tree fall, but there's always also a certain sadness, and you never really get over it. I don't, anyway. Several years ago in the blowdown where we had grouse nests right in the middle of the unit that we was cutting. And it's quite a trick, you know, to just keep everything off of it. And you know, a grouse will stay right there and till the very last minute, and it'll fly off. It'll come back if you leave it alone. I mean, don't handle the eggs or anything like that. And we've cut a few settings where we've left the nests and the grouse there disturbed, and
Cut all around it.
all around it. We'll fall everything away from it. What few we had to fall, we'll fall away from it. When it's blow down, why we bucked it, we were real careful, and we left it intact.
The things are so unpredictable. That's all there is to it. There's 100,000 different situations, and there's 100,000 different outcomes for each one, and it's just impossible to figure out what is going to happen in each one. You become wary, you become wise, and you become cagey, and a lot of men that have ended up in the cemetery, of course, because of just these unknown factors in the situation that finally catch up with them.
But I can remember when I was working, to me, there were I worked a few places, but I was just starting out. But when I worked in a place like Valset's or Black Rock, or when I went to work to Joe Flory's, well, it meant something, because those were the camps that were pretty tough. They're hard work. They got out a lot of logs, and though maybe it was the hard way, and a lot of mistakes were made in those days, and they hurt a lot of men, but that was logging in those days. And it meant something to loggers, you know.
Well, those were highball camp, pretty highball.
Some of them were. They generally all were tended to be. Some were more so, maybe in an unsafe manner, maybe in the way they disregarded men. But loggers seemed to have accepted a certain amount of that. It seemed to have been a way of life in those days. That was the whole story. It wasn't that it was unsafe as such, which it was, but more so because it was a way of life. I think there was some appeal in that fact itself. They didn't seem to be too worried about it. I think they had a confidence in themselves, or they built up a confidence in yourself, for the same reason that if you didn't, why, you wouldn't, of course, last very long.
He could take him any place he could take his team. And he'd go right into a tree that had bucked up, you know, sawed up in logs. By gosh, and he'd bring them bulls. He'd cut a road, make a road into the tree. And he'd take them bulls in there, and he'd stand right in there with his goat stick and make them come around him, you know. Golly, when the last bull yoke made the turn, he stopped them, and they was hooked on then. But he'd stand right in there. There'd be bulls coming this way and bulls going that way around him. He'd stand right in there. You know where to go to bull to make him mind an animal, a cow brute? It's high up behind the shoulder. My God, they can't take that. And that learns them quick. They don't want it the second time. You know, a cow brute knows a damn sight more than they get credit for it.
Yeah. And the next job I got was logging behind the bull team. And that was about 1898. And the bull team was all the power I had there. And my father was hauling timber, and I was greasing skids. The only team in the outfit was probably the leader. There's the one that understood all the signals. They'd turn, well, they asked them to have to turn and go with him, see. They could take a bull right off the ranch that's never been hooked up and hook him up and go logging with him. Just a few days of training.
A bull puncher's supposed to be a man that every other word's a swear word, you know. They hired, while I was working there that summer, they hired a bull puncher, and he was a preacher. I guess he didn't last long. They claimed it because he wouldn't swear. You greased with a swab on a stick, you know, and According to the way your load was pulling, you greased every skid if you had a heavy load, and if you had a light load, why, you greased maybe every second skid or third skid, and you greased between the last yoke of bulls and the log. A new bull, he was always next to the log, and you had to look out for him because he'd kick the shit out of you. I had a fellow named Beasley driving bulls, and he unyoked them at noon, by God, and laid down and went to sleep, fed the bulls. By God, and there was 4 or 5 days before they found all the bulls. Yeah, most of them old fellows that knows anything about bulls are gone, the biggest part of them. And the horses took the place of the bulls, and then the steam took the place of the horses. A good horse team will outpull a good bull team. That is, just 2 and 2. The horses didn't last very long. I think they're too high-tempered for woods. And they didn't have the means of logging steep ground then. If a horse couldn't go there, why, they didn't log it.
But everything's logged on the ground. There's no high leads. Drag them on the ground. And we used to use jack screws up the top of the high hills. They shoot it down the hill so they can reach them with a spool.
You take a log that gets out here and you're ground logging, and it hangs up out here, or you've got to stop, and somebody's got to go out there maybe, 200 or 300 feet, and change that choker around to kick that log out from behind that stump.
I was chasing we'd ride the logs most of the way down after they got started. Sometimes we'd run alongside and we'd jump on the logs and ride over the smooth places. And we hooked them logs together though with a dog, and that old line started to tighten. The logs would stay still for long, and all at once they'd take a jump. Sometimes they'd all come apart. Then we had to pull them together and dog them together again.
When the first donkeys come out, why, they ground logged with them. That's what they run into, was a problem of hang-ups on the ground. And then someone got the idea that if they could raise the logs up, why, they'd get away from that. And that's where the spark will come into being, was with the idea of getting a lift on the end of the log to raise them over objects.
They just had got into the spar trees. They had stump rigs just before that, but I didn't even see that. That was a little before my time.
What's a stump rig?
Well, they just springboard up so high as they thought they dared to, and hang their rigging up in that. They just kept getting higher.
Well, this is about 1915. I rigged the first high lead tree at Hammond's Head. It was over 100 feet high. The climber ahead of me, he went up on the springboard about 180 feet and topped this tree and hung the pass block. So they brought a pair of spurs out. And that's the first climbing outfit I ever seen. And I put them on, and the only way I could get up the tree was to put my, to kind of work the rope around and get my feet in them springboard holes, and then I could throw the rope up. And I rigged the tree myself.
Your rope has a steel core in it, but that will withstand a glancing blow of the axe to help. But if you hit it straight, why, so that steel core doesn't help much if you hit it a straight blow. And your rope is right up there where you're chopping all the time when you're limbing the tree, especially going up. That's usually where your danger is of cutting it off. That was where the most of them happened, was in limbing the tree going up. They would chop the rope off.
I've cut 2 strands out of a 4-strand rope, plumb off. But then anytime you cut 2 strands out of a 4-strand rope, you've got the others cut pretty good. If your tree lent quite a little bit, why, you know, it's apt to split on you. It split on you, and why, you're just too bad. You'd break your rope or it would kill you right there.
And I got pretty tired going up, and it was so big at the butt I couldn't get my rope completely tied, so I just had to hang on to one end of it till I got up to where it tapered enough that I could tie the rope. And when I got up to the top, I kept noticing I was getting slack, but I got tired because I'd been in the hospital and I wasn't too well recuperated. So I decided to rest, and I kind of leaned back and I looked, and here that rope had come untied, and I just had the end of it between my two fingers, holding on to it up there. Well, it gives you kind of a thrill when that top goes out and the old trunk starts swaying back and forth. I've always kind of enjoyed it.
When the top finally goes, what do you have to do?
Well, the first thing you have to do is drop your saw or axe, whatever you have in your hand, which you've got tied to your belt, and then you swing around directly behind it and get your spurs dug in well and brace yourself so you can ride with the tree. If you're on the side of it and it's a limber tree, it would give you such a shake that you might kick your spurs loose and you'd just be hanging in your rope and it'd beat your face to a pulp up there. Oh, good tall limber tree, I'd probably, some of them probably swing 20 feet, the sway of it up there.
I just thought I could have showed you a picture of a guy standing up on top of it, and I stood up on him. The standing up, it don't bother you at all. It's when you go to get down, moving, you know, bending to get down. That's the main thing. Of course, you're nuts to do it. No, I stood up on, I don't know, 4 or 5. But then that ain't in the work or ain't in nothing. That's just because you're crazy to do it. Just take your life into your own hands doing it. I've seen where a fellow was killed there by a tree splitting on him. I've had him to crack, but I never down for, a foot or 2 or 3 foot. But, of course, when you do that, you're on the spurs at that time, see, you know, then, why, you get scared, you can come down on them pretty fast. And the more experience you got, so you can come down a tree and just, 6, 8, 10 feet at a jump. Just kicking the rope out and coming down and just kind of just letting your spurs dig in. It's quite a practice, see.
He went up the top of a tree, he said, and he was up there about 150 feet, and he said there was a steep canyon where he was cutting the top off. He said, as the top broke over, he said it kicked back, and he said, I unbuttoned my belt and stepped right on the ground.
Several times I've taken a man's place where they'd just been killed on that job and step right in and do his job. It don't make you feel too goddamn funny or successful.
Well, I'll tell you, that moving them donkeys in that rough country was something. I've run out of water on a move like that, and you'd have to stop and pull the fire out because you didn't know there wasn't enough water in the boiler to be safe. I've had them where if you just let the slack line off, they'd just fall over. You'd pick out the best road at the least amount of stumps you could, and you'd hook your line on one side of the sled, and that would make your donkey go one way, and you hook on the other side and make it go the other way. And that's the way you went around, moved around the stumps. I've moved them 100 feet in a day, or maybe not even that far some days.
They used to say, run in, save your job without save your ass.
Goddamn right, boy. If you wanted to be moving, you didn't want to stumble.
Look back on the line.
You know, when they used them old steam donkeys, you wanted to run, too.
whenever they heard that bell click, they blowed the whistle. And it was up to you to move. You had to already know which way you was going to get out of the way. And sometimes you didn't have much time because years ago they figured that throttle ought to come wide open. Just awful quick after they give them a high ball to go ahead.
I've heard of a man getting killed in the morning in the woods, and they put him behind a stump till that evening to go into camp. Now that's what they call a high ball camp. They wouldn't, a dead man didn't mean any more than that to them. They would hold him till the evening to get their work in and then take him in.
Several years back, why they didn't think anything about it, killing a choker setter or something, you know. They go right on logging, they never stop. The unions come in, that's what straightened that situation out, you see.
And when you did get a big old growth in and brought him in and so on, it seemed like almost like physical combat. That log did not want to move, and he would hang up, slow down, roll around behind a stump, behind a tree, or dig into a hill or something to try and resist all your efforts to get him in. And it was up to the logger to use every bit of force and cunning and however he could get it, through his ability, through prayer, through swearing, through, they used to say you could talk him in. And if sometime a log would go into the landing that it looked like he was guided by a hand, and they would say that the log had an eye in the end of it, that he was watching where he was going.
Well, during the Depression, I was working for a superintendent. They called him Vinegar Face.
Vinegar Face.
So he says to this hooker, we've got to have a few more logs. Well, how many do you want, Charlie? Twice as many as you're getting, that won't be half enough.
But what caused a lot of that was they contracted to the rigging crew. After they got so many thousand in per day or week or month, well, then they got a bonus. And, of course, the boys started jumping right at her and flying right at it then. And consequently, why, lots of them got hurt over it. And then, of course, the hook tenders, they was on a bonus a lot of the time. And the side rods.
The cleaner the ground is cut, the better your high lead works. Because you hit a tree back there, why your log goes on one side and your line on the other. Why, you've got a natural hang-up. You have a high lead, see, and your line pulls high and you don't hang up behind them stumps and stuff. It's near so bad. You can get more logs with a high lead than you can with a ground lead. And it's just a faster way of getting logs in.
We put in the most logs in an 8-hour day. As I remember, there was 1,690,000 feet. They claimed at the time that the world record had never been beaten on account of not having the timber to do it again.
When the train would hit there with its open mulligan or boxcar-like device, which was open, no sides or ends on it, why, before this had come to a full stop, the loggers would begin jumping off, and their cork boots rumble this plank, a huge plank platform area, just like thunder as they rolled off of jumped off of the train.
At a long period of time where the old tramp logger used to, well, he liked to see the other side of the hill once in a while and learn new games, you know, in different ways. That's their life, just to keep moving, although they're just out hunting for a good cookhouse. And your companies at one time, it just soon you did, because when a new man come in, why, they get a lot more work out of him. He was faster, quicker, energetic. He was always in a hurry. And after he was there a while, maybe he'd slow down. Well, after he started slowing down, then they just soon he'd move on. Because they'd get a new man is the same way. You could go to town maybe for 2 weeks and come right back and go back to work there. They figure you needed to rest maybe. In a couple of weeks, you come back and you's all new again. You just bounce, and you's hurrying. Highball. They just didn't want them staying around what's called home garden.
And every other morning or so, we'd come out and Flora would be out there by the mulligan, where they're going to ride out the crummy. And he'd say, "You want to go to town today?" And he'd say, "No." Well, he said, "You're going, and I'll get your partner." So he'd so he'd give him a ticket, and he'd go in and get his time. And he'd say, "There's another guy coming there. Would you like to go on the other side today?" "Well, which side is that?" "Bun side," he said. So there would go. There would be crew coming in, a crew working, and a crew going out. They made just as much through the employment office as they did locally.
Not an employment office, the slave market.
A slave market, okay. But he would pay the slave market, what, $1 or
Well, with them dollars, depends on what the job in the woods paid, and he collected accordingly up there. If it was a little higher priced job, you might have to pay 2.5. If it wasn't quite so high price, you might get by for $1. But you had to pretty always go through that way.
When you went to town, you went down to the Erickson's saloon, and they took care of you there. You had to wait long to leave in the kitchen washing dishes for your something to eat.
So I asked him for a job. He said, "Old Jimmy Joyce would kill me." He said he finds out I put another man on. But he said, "God damn it, go up today and tramp tomorrow." He said, "We got to all stick together."
The Wobblies, IWWs, they created changes about during the war and right after the war.
You know, even the most ignorant timber beast realized that all he has is his labor to sell.
I've been what they call a boomer, you see. Well, go in place, you packed your bed, your clothes, took everything with you you're going to need on your eats. They'd fed you and give you a kind of a place to sleep.
Because in the early days, the bunkhouse, they had sometimes 15, 20, 25 men in bunkhouses, double deckers.
One stove.
One stove. Yes. And they had a big line around the pumps right there, and they'd hang that old underwear up on that line, and it'd start steaming.
2 moonlight rides every day and a picnic lunch. What else would you want? They'd go out in the spring and work in the logging wood till fall, when it was time to make the drive, when they got their amount of timber out. And then they ceased logging and they all took out on the drive. So they were the same men that run the river that cut the timber and hauled it in. There was no special guys for that. They just all was river drivers or loggers. It didn't make any difference. They'd start out, maybe they'd have 3, 4 2-horse teams. Mostly four 2-horse teams. And to pull the logs off of the bars with. And then they had a crew of about 7, 8 men with peavies rolling them off the bars and rock. And they'd make 3 or 4 miles a day, 3 miles sometimes. Sometimes they wouldn't make over a mile. Team horses pull them off these bars where they jam, they keep shoving one another, and they get out, and some of them clear on dry ground, gravel, and they drive the dogs in them, and this tripper, he would, dogger and tripper, he'd drive the dogs in and then ride the log out with his peavy, and he'd ride it out till it floated, and then he'd hit those dogs and knock them out, and just swing the horses right back around, the team around, and the log would take off down the river and go back and get another. One bad rock they always dreaded was the Jacoby rocks down there at Jasper, this side of Jasper. And they always had a big jam there, and they figured on 2 or 3 days of breaking that. There's one place the river drivers always dreaded because they just knew the whole river was jammed with log, and it's hard to break out there too. You take to jam up like that with the swift water. See how it's pretty swift there, and it's hard to get them loose because there's so much pressure on them, and you got to break the down river log loose first, see, and they'd hook in the end of one and pull it around to break the jam, the key log. They'd figure out the best one to pull, and they hook into it and break her, and maybe there'd be a whole bunch of them go down. There's about 3 top hands, on the log drive that could ride logs. And they was all trippers, and tripped the dog, and they'd ride the logs. The last log that they'd pull off a bar, whoever tripped it, he'd ride it down the river. If it just went right through, it was fine, but if it hit a rock, and swung around, why, most generally they'd duck them. But they had their peavy with them to swim out with. Once in a while they'd lose the peavy, they couldn't make her. Yeah, they were real catty, them guys were.
The loggers, they tend to, I think, have a feeling that the woods are theirs.
Well, not all one could see then was timber. Big timber, medium timber, and small timber. And on a Sunday, sometimes we'd take a gun and go out and it'd be quiet, and you go out, well, you'd go quite a long ways. You'd see nothing but these beautiful big trees. You'd sit down on the log, and you could hear them talking to you almost, whispering out there, telling you what is going on, but you couldn't understand it. You never realized that someday you'd be a big stick, and never to come back again. And that forced you, It was almost, it was really a recreation just to go out there and sit down and look around and see all the beautiful trees all over. And that.
Yeah, over the years, you know, I've gone to work and there was a nice aroma about the woods. Something there that felt good. Maybe a week later, I wish I'd never seen the woods, you know. Maybe it was raining too hard or something like that. But then there's those mornings that there's a beautiful feeling about it. I think that's something that attracts all of them, that brings them back or keeps them there. To me, it's a little depressing because here these old fellows have been around for so long and so much of it has been wasted because well, the tops blew over, or they fell over, or they completely rotted out. Nobody got any use out of it. Here they live, well, 500 of their 700 years, nobody probably got any use out of it, maybe even by even seeing it, you know. But I like to see some of it because it does, I mean, it shows the durability of trees, how long they can last. And it's probably nice to have some of it still standing, I think, just as people like to see that.
Well, I really think that there's not going to be any forests of the future. Forest, to me, means splendid old trees with animals in it, with a variety of trees, snags, windfalls, everything that it took to create over the hundreds of years that the live trees stood. I feel quite certain that the forest of the future that the big companies talk about now are going to be nothing more than they have began to call them, tree farm. And you won't be able to walk in them because a tree that is 35 years of age, he's still bushy, he's still got a lot of little pin limbs. There'll be no majesty, there'll be no cathedral-like feeling. Probably they'll harvest the trees at 25 to 35 years of age, that they'll be after fiber that you hear them talk about. I know that little trees are beautiful, and you see them growing in beautiful spots and so on, but certainly a dense growth of second growth trees that you would walk into, why, as far as I'm concerned, there's nothing there. It's not mature. It isn't old enough yet to bring a feeling of man.
I think your rapid yield growth is going to be a good thing, but I think that we still have to leave representative stands of the old growth for several reasons. One, for our future generation, and also for wildlife. I don't know what just what will happen with our that type of wildlife, unless there's some representative stands left so that they do have a place. It's one of the facts of life. That's is the way your trees grow, and we have to think that far ahead. Mistakes we make now, we could be paying for them 200 years later. We'll always need some of your fine-grained old growth for certain things for a long rotation. 300-400 years old, possibly. And then when they've reached their climax stage and were logged, well, then there should be others coming up, so you'd have a continuous representative stand in your old growth. I guess timber's been my life. That's all I've ever done to speak of.
No, I think that most loggers, when I think they get the feeling that their livelihood is made through timber, and I think they try to take care of what is there. If there's 2 or 3 trees standing, a bunch of little trees, 2 or 3 big trees that are merchantable, there's times that I'll walk up and leave them. Even if I'm contract logging and I'm supposed to take all the merchantable timber, I'll still leave a couple of trees to keep from tearing up a bunch of little regrowth. I think that any animal that is using the land that you have, I don't think you have the right to force them off on it. Because they don't hurt anything. Really, they were here long before the rest of us were there, some of their ancestors, and really they don't hurt a tree too much.
You feel like you're sharing that land rather than it being yours.
Well, do share it. It's kind of desolate if you go up there and you walk through there and don't even see a deer track or a bear track or any kind of a track at all.
I'm logging on my own land here, and as I log it, I'm leaving trees that I think that are beautiful. I'm leaving enough thickets that will hold deer. I'm doing everything that I can to make this particular part of my land fit along with the wildlife. I think that it's very necessary that a man share. The wild things need the land. They don't know anything about ownership, property lines, your man's desire to wrench a living out of the soil, and although I say it's my land, I have a title to it. It's theirs too, and maybe theirs more so than mine. So I try to share it with them. Man wants to run things according to the way he would like to see. And our forest and all the way they grew and came to be was it was the result of the grand planned trial and fitting of nature. And man, he walks in and he says it's going to be this way. So this is why I believe that our forests, as we found them, are doomed. It's going to be something else.
I wish we could have had a recording of what they look like, you know, all of these standing there, you know, right now, but it's too late. Every little ways you go in a little draw or a little canyon, there'd be a beautiful spring. Water. The most pure water in the world. Now, and after all of the forests are cut off, those springs are extinct. Most of them are dried up. It just takes it out of the land. See, the water, the trees held the water, and the water would stay up a long time. Now it comes in a whole bunch, floods everything, then it's gone. Maybe in time, if the second growth goes back, but then they'll cut that again off.
But the thing that you cannot overlook is that whenever a guy says, I want this tree, and I'll replace it, you take a look at the years that it took the tree to grow that he wants to cut, and then realize that you can't replace that tree without an equal number of years. And I just doubt if they'll ever let them grow back again. So when they cut a tree down that's 300 years old, how many generations of people are going to go by before they see that tree again?
Loggers have to cut it. That's their way of life, and we need to cut timber, but we need to preserve some too.
But you have to change patterns of thought in order to approach logging in a different manner. There's many ways you can log a log, you know.
Well, one thing you said was that going to work in the woods right then at that time was your downfall.
Well, the reason why I say it is my downfall is because I never been able to go out and work at some other occupation and stay with it, because I always got lonesome to go back to the woods or go back to logging.
In early days, I remember one time I went in town the guy I was with was dressed up, but I had my old clothes on. And I remember a little girl, when we walked past him on the street, she said, "There goes two loggers." "No," she says, "one of them's a gentleman."
We were coming home one night, and I left water in my water bag, and I was just hoping old Heavy had shut his eyes. And he was sitting in the seat like that, you know, and he was a big, heavy man and made quite a pocket. And when he did shut his eyes, I was right there toward the water, you know, in that depression. Set the water bag down, you know, and the old son of a gun, he just raised one eye, you know. He just raised one eye. He looked around, dear.
You're right where it come from, huh?
Oh, boy.
Hard life, but I always liked it.